They're dumbfounded at what goes on here. The corruption drips off the walls in this place. It's crazy.
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers.
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
That's what the left-wing media wants you to think. You can't handle the truth. But I'll always give you the unvarnished truth of the corruption, media bias, and downright lies you are being told by Albany today. I'm New York State Assemblyman David DiPietro. Some say I'm the conscience of Albany because I believe you, the citizens of New York, need to know the truth. Welcome to the Truth in Politics podcast and to this week's show.
Welcome, everybody. Dave DiPietro. This is Truth in Politics, and it is exactly like it says. You're going to hear the truth. And today is going to be a very special show because we just started back in Albany yesterday. It was great, folks. We drove up to Albany, 4.5 hours I did yesterday morning, got here, did a little work in my office, went down into the chambers, and we were in the chambers approximately 27 minutes. That's right, 27 minutes, so that the speaker could say great things about what we were going to do this year. And then our side took a couple minutes and said, we're going to work, how we're going to work together and get things done for New York State. And then they gavelled us out and said, see you next week. That's right. Cost the taxpayers almost $1 million to bring everybody, staff, personnel, security, all back into the Capitol to make it look like we're working when we did absolutely nothing. Okay. But except waste another day and dollars of your tax dollars. So, but today I've got a special guest, and it's Senator George Borello. I want to welcome him on because we're going to talk about, even though we were there yesterday, what we've been doing for the last few weeks as we get ready for this next year in New York State, to tell you exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and hold on to your wallets and hold on to your rights because they're all going to be up for grabs this year again. So I'd like to bring on my Senator George Borello. George, thanks for coming on. Great to have you on the show. You're always a breath of fresh air. We love having you. I don't know what happened over in the Senate chambers yesterday. I went over briefly to say hello to some of the senators, and I don't know if yours was as quick as ours was, but we just said the pledge, gavelled in, gavelled out, and drove up, drove home. How'd it go with you yesterday?
Well, I think in the Senate, we just took a little bit more time for the Democrats to pat themselves on the back. So we might have lasted a little bit longer than you, and of course, the president of the Senate is technically the lieutenant governor. And I was amazed at the number of senators when he stepped up on the under the dais said, who's that guy? Because he's probably been one of the most invisible lieutenant governors we've ever had, unfortunately. Nice guy, but so far haven't seen much from him. But he did preside over our opening session. But more of the same. I want to give tremendous credit, to Andrew Lanza, our floor leader in the Senate, who really hit them between the eyes with the truth about how New York is under one-party rule has become more dangerous, less affordable, and people are voting with their feet. They're leaving in droves, But like you, we were hopeful that perhaps we can work together in a bipartisan manner to actually turn this around. But I don't hold out a lot of hope because the first thing you need to do when you're addressing a problem is actually admit that you have a problem. And the Democrats don't think this is a problem. They think that this is the right path for New York State, that those of us that have seen increases in crime, that's okay, because they have a social justice agenda that says it doesn't matter how many victims we create, we are going to have a criminal justice system that does not punish the guilty. And same thing with the affordability. They talk about we need more affordable housing. Yet the way to make housing more affordable in New York State is to make New York State more affordable. And that's not happening. We're continuing to see increases in taxes and fees, the increase in fees on businesses, which are passed along to consumers, increase in energy costs. But yet they somehow think that they're going to force people to build more houses and basically apartment complexes. They're not talking about houses. They're talking about creating dorms, essentially, to house people in mass quantities in concentrated areas. They want to bring the congestion and chaos of New York City to the rest of New York State.
Right. And you know what? And let's hit some of these topics, because we've really this year is going to be, and I try to tell people, this year is going to be really not a good year. Okay, because only for the sense that our freedoms have been eroded, the new Second Amendment laws. I go right down the list, but this state is teetering. Let's start with the budget, because if you read the July report from our comptroller DiNapoli, one thing he actually says in that report, he makes reference to if the Democrats don't do something, he's warning us that the spending is out of control. He's warning us that this budget is upside down. And his quote is, "We are at a financial cliff," meaning we're about to go bankrupt. But the Democrats are looking at that and they're laughing. In the assembly, they poo-poo it and just walk all over it. They're going to kick the can down the road this year because it's an election year. And next year, a year from today, which will come quickly, we are going to be in a bankruptcy mode, because at some point you've got to pay the fiddler. You can't kick it down another year after that, because these bills are due and the spending far outpaces the revenue, and it has since the Democrats took control in both houses. I mean, the budget's gone crazy. But that's where we're at right now, this financial cliff of about $10 billion. If you remember a bunch of years ago, they were $1 billion in the hole, and they'll never cut anything. So they just looked at the big board and they said, we're going to raise taxes on all these things, and people flew out of here at a record pace. For $1 billion, you can't do $10 to $15 increases in taxes. It bankrupts everybody. It just bankrupts us. That's where we're at. And I want to get your take on the Senate side, because the Democrats in the Assembly, they just refuse to accept this. They refuse to acknowledge it. And all the warning signs in the budget, the numbers are there. And I tell people, when it comes to math, the Democrats, second grade was the toughest 3 years of their life, because they can't understand basic math. They can't understand. They don't want to. Money grows on trees to them. Okay. It's never their fault. It's never their problem. It's never a matter of a budget. What are you talking about budget? We want this. We're going to spend it, and we're not going to worry about how it's paid for. And it's crazy, because like you said, the people flying out of here. And now that the Democrats have taken over both sides, for the first time, the last 5 years, you're watching the people fly out of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens, and Kings, okay, in Manhattan. They're flying out of there now. It was never a problem when the rest of the state was migrating out of here, because they couldn't afford it and because they were getting oppressed. But now that it's touching the New York City area, where the Democrats have complete control, now they're scratching their heads. But they refuse to do anything about it, as you mentioned. So, George, let's talk about that budget. What's going on in the Senate? What do you see coming up this year?
Well, first of all, let me say that the Democrats under one-party rule have been a dangerous combination of arrogance and ignorance. And I mean ignorance in the purest sense of the word. They really don't get it. Like you said, they don't understand the basics. I'm not big on mandates, but if I could mandate one thing, that all of our colleagues have to take Economics 101, because they clearly don't understand basic economics. And when you tell them New York's unaffordable, they say, well, we're going to raise the minimum wage. That when you tell them that people can't afford to own a house because of a lot of reasons, it's because they're saying, well, we're just going to make more houses. We don't need to make more houses. Quite frankly, there isn't a community that I'm aware of that doesn't have dilapidated homes that could be rehabilitated. What we need is for housing to be affordable by making owning a home affordable in New York State. And property taxes are a big problem. And why are property taxes high? Because every county budget, and I was in county government for 10 years, every county budget, essentially the vast majority of the money that is raised through property taxes goes to pay unfunded state mandates. And you ask what's going to happen. What's going to happen is more of the same this year. The governor knows that this is a dire straits when it comes to our finances. Tom DiNapoli, our comptroller, I give him tremendous amount of credit for telling it like it is and speaking the truth, that this is a major problem, that we've chased away productive people in New York State. We've chased away people that pay income tax, that is a huge deficit. So what you're going to see is they're going to burden more of the local governments with the costs. The first sign of that was when Kathy Hochul confiscated the FMAP money. This is federal money that is supposed to go to pay Medicaid that comes from the federal government, and it was intercepted by Kathy Hochul, and she's now keeping it. And that's millions of dollars for every single county. So what does that mean? That means counties have to make up that difference. They're going to continue to put it on the backs of our property taxpayers because they think, despite the fact they think that housing is a right, they think anybody that owns a home is rich and they can just afford more and more property taxes. They want a world here in New York State that looks a lot like a third world country where most people live in rental housing that's controlled by the government, and only the elite, only the politically connected and the extremely wealthy can afford a private home. And that's where we're headed. We're headed in that direction in order to fund the ridiculous priorities that come out of Albany.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse this year because it's an election year. So all the Democrats, remember, and I try to tell people, they don't understand, but I'm going to reiterate it real quick, George, because you know it. They have super majority in both houses, meaning there's 150 assembly people in New York State and 106 are from the Democrat Party and only 44 are from the Republican Party. So they have more than a 2/3 majority. We don't have we can't do anything. They don't even put us, budget talks come, just like with you now. When budget talks come, the Democrats get together like they have been now since the fall and since last year, and they talk about where their priorities are, what they want for their constituents, and we're left in the dark. We sit in March. We sit and do nothing literally every day until that budget comes out, and we don't know what it is until it comes out, and then we vote on it. And so we have no say in it as a Republican or a conservative. And that's the same way in the Senate now. It's a supermajority Democrat, and that's what we're dealing with, that in the majority of New York City that controls all of us because of the population numbers in the city, when we're beholden to that. And so I tell people, only thing we can do is fight, okay, show common sense, stand in unity, and try and make changes on a singular level, because we're not in the room. It used to be 3 men in a room. Now it's just one party in the room. And it's a disaster for New York State. And I tell people, the same people who put us in this position for the last few years, they're back in power again this year. Nothing's going to change. It's just going to be the same old, until the most drastic measure happens, George, which is this state when we come to the fiscal edge. So what's your take on it with the Senate?
Well, we're in a similar situation now. I came into the Senate after a special election in 2019. So 2020 was my first year in the Senate. And of course, we had the pandemic, and we saw our Democrat colleagues more than willing to relinquish all of their authority to Andrew Cuomo, which created a literal dictatorship in New York State. And we saw the devastating impact of that. Since then, we now have Kathy Hochul, who is not able to effectively stand up to the Democrats, and she goes along to get along. But more importantly, she feels that she has to do things that she knows are fundamentally bad for New Yorkers, particularly New Yorkers outside of New York City, and she does it in order to pander to that New York City radical base of the Democratic Party that sets the agenda. And look, I come from a family of Democrats, and my parents are Democrats, and they are fed up. They are fed up with what they see, and this is not the Democratic Party of the working class. So outside of New York City, I think that there can be unity, because it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, if you're a member of a third party, or if you're not affiliated at all. You should be feeling the pain and seeing the consequences of what one party rule has done. And therefore, even if you're a Democrat like my parents, you see the need to restore balance in state government, because this has been a runaway train for 4 years, and it has quickly created a horrible situation here in New York State. And that's where, this is what we will fight this year. And, we will fight. We are fighting. And, despite the fact that they don't want to share what they're doing with us, once they do release those budgets and those policies, we do make noise. And by the way, it does make a difference. In the budget process last year, I was very proud to stand with you and many others on pushing back against this ridiculous ban on natural gas. And we were able to get some exceptions for agriculture. The governor put in her 30-day amendments, an exemption for agricultural buildings and restaurants and so forth. But it's not enough. No one should have to succumb to this. But the people of New York State can't just rely on us to be in there, by ourselves. They need to stand up and say, number one, you need to send more Republicans into office. And, unfortunately, we have a lot of folks who look at them as a whole and say they're a disaster for New York State, but my guy's okay. And you see that around Western New York and Central New York and the Southern Tier, where they continue to essentially be the bootlickers to the New York City radicals, but somehow they've convinced the people, their constituents that they're okay. They're fake moderates. They say, well, I didn't agree with that, but there's nothing I could do. Well, they need to send somebody to Albany that can do something about it.
You're right. And one more thing on that budget. What's going to happen this year? Because, as you know, people are shaking their head because they're just starting to hear about it. But the study has been approved for reparations in New York State. And without getting into the weeds, I can tell you from what I understand is I think that's going to come out. It won't come out till after the budget. And then they won't do much about it this year because it's an election year, and it'll when the real numbers come out, when they really put the screws to this next year, they want to get that study done this year, but then leave the figures out of it because it's an election year. But then next year, I think that this is going to make California's and San Francisco's reparations look like a drop in the bucket. I'm predicting that this is going to be literally something in the range of $20 billion or more for New York State reparations, and they're not going to flinch what it does to the budget because they will have been elected next November, and they know they've got 2 years, so they're just going to implement it. They don't. So, what's your take on it in the Senate side with this reparations?
Well, first and foremost, we know how divisive this is and how unnecessary and political this is. You're essentially going to create more divisiveness, among the races, which is not what we need. We don't need more racial tension, but that's what this will cause. And I understand there are people that think that reparations are necessary, but let's look at what the reality is. The reality is that under Democrat rule, people of all colors, all faiths, all backgrounds are far worse off. But particularly people of color and particularly Black people have really been damaged by the policies of the Democrat one-party rule. New York State is far more dangerous. It's far less affordable. It's much more expensive to be here. Your freedoms are being taken away. And so how does the Democratic Party keep people of color loyal to them? Well, what they're trying to do now, it's an attempt to bribe them, to keep them loyal to the Democratic Party. That's what this really is. This is a bribery attempt. And I think people will see through this. But at the end of the day, the cost is going to be tremendous. I believe in California, if I'm not mistaken, the total cost of this is going to approach $1 trillion. Okay, that's $1,000 billion that they're talking about. They're talking about giving each person that's identified as being eligible more than $1 million. And how do you decide who's eligible and who's not eligible? How do you handle that? And they have no way to implement that. So, like you said, this could be even more costly here in New York State. How do we even go about doing this? It's outrageous. I think most people, even though those folks who aren't willing to say it, know that it's outrageous, and it is divisive.
Right. And my friend Santos, who's Philippine and served in our military, and his relatives are back in the Philippines, but he was born and raised here. He gets upset. He says, you know what? We never had anything to do with slavery. Why I live in New York? Why am I paying taxes for something I had nothing to do with? And that's most everyone in New York State. I don't have any relatives. Our relatives came over here back in the early 1900s with like a lot of Italians. It doesn't make sense, but the fact is, to them, it does. And like I say, there's one question I ask on reparations. If we do this, let's say because it's what they're saying is there's a problem, and for every problem you have to have a solution. So the solution to I asked them, if we do this, if we spend millions and billions and trillions of dollars, will it end racism? You're telling us that this is what we need to fix a problem. Well, the fix is to end racism. Will this end racism? Nope. It's not going to do one thing to end racism, but it is going to cause more racism because it's a have and have not, and you're taking from one people and giving it to another at an extraordinary price to fix a zero problem. You're not fixing the problem. So again, this is a huge money grab. I don't care about all the philosophy and morality behind it. It's wrong. And so with that, George, I want to move on because we're going to deal with that later on. We have got one thing I want to talk about is the illegals coming into this state. They're flooding in now, especially in New York City. The buses are coming in. It's causing this state, the chaos in this state. And the fact is, the people coming in, I've had FBI and CIA people on this podcast, and there's no control at the border anymore under Biden. Okay, you can be political all you want, but the fact is that's the truth, and everyone will tell you. They can't track. Within 7 days, they lose track of 90% of the people coming in as they disperse in the country. They're not allowed to track, and they lose track. And it's not a couple of terrorists now. The FBI itself has said there's over 20 to 30,000 known terrorists in this country, and they don't know where they are. So when the next big 9/11 hits or something smaller, like we just saw a few days ago here, when that hits, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when it happens. They say it's no longer, we're controlling it and we're going to, if it happens, we're going to try. It's just, we don't know. It's going to be when it happens because they say it's going to happen. So, Chris, can you roll that? There's a million videos, but we've got another video about what's happening at our borders.
Play some of this footage. I went back to Lukeville, Arizona, and what I saw should shock every single American. As soon as I got there was a tent of 150 fighting age men, mostly from West Africa, Muslim countries in Africa, the Middle East, and India. And what they told me is that they actually, the new place that they're getting all of these people from, right here, you can see the footage right there on the screen. Those tents, that was yesterday, and this is happening every single day. 150 of them. They said they had over 500 yesterday alone in that one location. 500. And what scared me, now I went up, the Border Patrol, you could tell, was so frustrated. They wanted me to get in there and film it and show you close up. As soon as I did that, at the end of this video, I had a guy come out from National Park, said I couldn't be that close. I couldn't film this. I had to go across the street. And our own national park, our national monument down there. This is what's coming into America. But the scariest part, Border Patrol came up to me and he said, you need to know and you need to report this. We're getting huge numbers from Syria right now. And if we can show the picture, they sent me a picture of one of the guys from Syria. If we can show that picture of the guy, this guy just came across our southern border. But this is just one.
So I see this and I see these videos every day. Okay, I get these feeds. And like everybody else, I look at those pictures. There was not one child there. There was not one woman there. There was not one older person there. Every one of those people was between the ages of 18 and 30, all military fighting age men. And that's 90% of the border, from what I'm understanding, is coming over. Where are their families? Where are the kids? Okay, yeah, whenever they get a family, it's like the media globs onto it, says, hey, we've got a family coming over the border. This is great. Let's take some pictures and make it sound like it's a humanitarian thing when it's not. It's chaos. From what I understand, they've been shipped all over. They've made their way through the southern border now, and not only are they getting bussed up to New York City and in New York, parts of New York State, I understand there are some that have come to Niagara Falls. Some of these militants are already in Niagara Falls. They're in Lackawanna, which has a large Muslim community. They're in there. They're into that community. I mean, we're watching New York City is a tire fire. I call it the rotten apple. It's not the big apple anymore. It's unsafe to go there. The crime is out of control. The violence is out of control. They don't know what to do. They want to put another tax on all of New Yorkers to pay for this because they are a sanctuary city, but yet they're blaming the federal government. You come out and say, we'll take all your migrants and your immigrants. We'll take all these illegals. But it's not our fault. The hypocrisy just drips off the wall with these people, George. Senator, what's your take on this? You've seen it firsthand too.
Well, first of all, from a national security standpoint, it's an incredibly scary time right now. And the fact that we don't know who's coming across the border, and so many people are coming across the border, millions. Joe Biden is absolutely responsible for this. He has blood on his hands whenever this next event happens, the next terrorist attack. And quite frankly, every Democrat that continues to support Joe Biden, that continues to say this is okay, that makes excuses and says, if you don't want an open border, then you're racist, you're this, you're that. Those folks should understand the incredible peril we're in. Name one other country in the world that allows this. Okay, one other country in the world that says you sneak across our border and we're going to welcome you. We're going to pay for everything. Where else is that happening? I just saw an article recently in New York City, which is getting a huge influx because they are a sanctuary city. By the way, New York State is a sanctuary state, and that was done in 2017 by Andrew Cuomo by executive order. So all Kathy Hochul has to do with a stroke of a pen, she could undo New York State's sanctuary status. She refuses to do so. Mayor Adams wrings his hands. We have states of emergency for a self-created crisis. That's what this is, a self-created crisis. It starts with the Democrats in Washington and the President of the United States, who is, in my estimation, should be tried for treason for what is allowed to happen in this to come across this border. And it continues on in the blue states that consider themselves to be sanctuaries. And that's where we are here in New York State. And it's costing us billions of taxpayer dollars.
New York dollars.
What's that? Yes.
New York citizen dollars, not federal, New York citizen dollars.
Exactly. The federal government isn't given a dime to address any of this. This is New York State and New York City taxpayer dollars. And they are, right now, they are also on top of the unbelievable amount of money this is costing. There's a tremendous amount of waste. They are throwing out 5,000 meals a day in these migrant camp situations and migrant housing situations that we have in New York City. Imagine what 5,000 meals could do for homeless shelters throughout New York State, for the folks that are trying to provide meals to people. I look at the tremendous progress we made with Nourish New York, and now we have a program where the Department of Health is saying, well, this food bank isn't going to get any money, but this food bank will. They're picking and choosing, and yet we're throwing out 5,000 meals a day in New York City for people that came here illegally. It's absolutely egregious. That's the status of what's going on here. And I said it before, you can't address a problem until you admit you have a problem. And right now, with New York City and New York State remaining sanctuaries, which is a welcome at, saying, come here to New York from anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter how you get here. We're going to welcome you. We're going to pay for your food, your housing, your children's education, your health care. We're going to do all that. All you have to do is show up in New York State. And that's where we are right now. And somehow the governor considers that to be a state of emergency for something that is a self-created crisis.
Yeah, that's right. And it's all tied into and this all goes back also to bail reform, because they're letting all these criminals out. There's people that have been arrested hundreds of times for shoplifting and minor thefts which normally would go, at least after a few of them, would go to jail for a day or a month or whatever, and they keep getting let out. And that's a whole nother show we could do on. But I want to just get your take on one more, the election issue. The governor wants to change all, and the Democrats want to change all elections to even years, and bypass the sovereignty of every town, every home rule of towns and villages and cities in this country, in this state. All for power, all for a Democrat power grab. So what's your take on that, Senator?
Well, the excuse is, well, we need more people to vote in local elections, and the turnout is poor. First and foremost, the worst turnout doesn't matter if it's a local election year or a presidential year, is in New York City. And this does not apply to New York City. The cities will not be impacted by this. They will not have to move their local elections. And this whole idea that, well, we have to make sure everybody votes. No, we have to make sure that we have an informed electorate, and people who wish to vote, vote. Okay, this is still America. If you choose not to vote, you don't have to. But this is just an excuse for them to try to create more chaos in our elections, and that's what this will do. The idea of a local town supervisor, county legislator having to compete in state and federal election years for airtime, for getting the message out on their local issues is outrageous. You're going to have lots of people blindly voting for party only and not voting for people. And in local elections, you see it. You see it everywhere. I can point to towns where the registration is highly Republican, yet they still have Democrats in their town government, even town supervisors. Same thing in the opposite with high enrollments of Democrats over Republicans. You see people voting for people and not parties in those local elections. That's going to go away. And that's what the Democrats want. They think this is somehow going to allow them to essentially take over every municipal government in the state because they're going to move it to these national and state elections. That's not what's going to happen. What you're going to do is you're going to make red counties redder and blue counties bluer. That's what's going to happen as a result of this. And I don't think that's good for New Yorkers.
No, I agree with you 100%. And this is, if you remember, it was last year, our second last day in Albany, where they keep us up all through the night. So it might have been at 2:45 in the morning, the Democrats ran right over the the New York State Constitution. If you remember, in November of last year, the citizens voted like 60-40 on your ballot in November, to get rid of the ballot harvesting and the no-show voting.
Yeah,
which everyone knows was just was so corrupted. It's not even funny. You can't even defend it. And so the people voted it out and said, we don't want this. We're done. Oh, the pandemic's over. We're done with all this. Less than 7 months later, after the citizens of the state voted, the New York State Assembly and Senate brought it up in our house at 2:40 in the morning with no press, nobody there, and rammed it down our throat. Not one Democrat literally stood up and said it was good. They just had the numbers to vote because they have supermajority. They put it up, and all of us started screaming, go, what are you doing putting us up under the cloak of darkness? Why are you going against the people, the will of the people? The people voted this down back in November. And you have the audacity that you think you know better than the people and that you're going to run over the people's will. And they did. They just voted it back in because it was a total power grab by the Democrats to say, this is communism, folks. This is, we're no better. We're in power. And we're going to do whatever we want. This was a total communist grab. And I was fighting it on the floor with a lot of my other colleagues and, to no avail because they had the supermajority and they just waited till the debate was over, voted it in and said, screw you to the taxpayer. Screw you to New York State citizens. You had that in the Senate also, correct?
Yeah, same thing. In fact, I debated that bill, and look at this whole idea that you're going to take something that New Yorkers rejected, the idea of no excuse absentee ballots, and you're going to now, through a technicality, they're saying, well, this only applies to early voting. It doesn't apply to, which is ridiculous. No. The Wall Street Journal did a great editorial on this where they berated the Democrats for what they're doing. But here's the thing. You're seeing this overarching theme Their policies, their way of doing things have made New York really a horrible place in a short period of time. So how do you stay in power when you're doing more and more things to alienate more and more people? You stay in power by manipulating the system, and that's what they are doing. They can't win on on their policies. They can't win on their practices. They can't win on the things that they think New Yorkers should have to deal with. So instead, they're going to rig the system, and that's what this is. Period.
That's and we're up against the clock, George. I'm going to let you finish it out before. Okay, tell anything you want to say as we get this out this week, and as we go back into Albany next week to actually start making the sauce, so to speak, and watching Democrats run right over our rights and the people. And we didn't even touch on Second Amendment. We didn't touch on the transgender issue in the schools. We didn't touch on a lot of things today. But anything you want to say to the folks out there in New York and around the country?
Well, first of all, David, thank you very much for having me on. It's been an honor to be on your podcast, and thank you for what you do, the fight that you have every day, standing up for the people you represent, and really everyone who values their freedom and liberty here in New York State. So thank you for being a great champion on so many levels. I still continue to have hope. I have hope that common sense can prevail. And that the people of New York State are finally going to wake up. Even the people in New York City who have seen so much, they've lost so much, including a lot of their fellow citizens. Hopefully they too will have the moment of realizing what has happened, the damage that has been done. And I think we can turn the state around. I don't want to leave. My family's here. My friends are here. My business is here. We can turn this around. This is a beautiful place to live. I love Western New York, and it's a beautiful state. It really is. But it has been destroyed by bad policy from the radicals that control the Democratic Party. And it's not all the Democrats. Like I said, I come from a family of Democrats. But the Democratic Party, the tail wags the dog. The most radical elements of their party are running the show, and that has to change. We need to restore balance, and we can do that. I have hope that can happen here in New York State.
God bless you, George. You do a great job up there. You're a true leader in this state. Thank you for coming on. We'll have you on again, folks. That's Senator George Borello, great friend of mine, a colleague up in the state government, fighting, just like I do and like many of us do. But we need your help, okay? We're in the minority as Republicans, as conservatives in this state. And you're watching, like Senator said, you're watching the just complete annihilation of this state by the far left. The tail does wag the dog here. And even in Western New York, the Democrats sit on their hands. They come back, and I have to laugh because they come back and say they're fighting for you. And in reality, they vote 99.9% of the time with New York City far left communists, because it's now no longer Democrat Republican. Now it's conservative. It's American versus communist, and it's also New York City versus the rest of the state. And we have to understand that, because that's our fight. So thank you for joining us. At the bottom, you've seen that. If you want to, these podcasts do cost a little money. If you'd like to help out in any way financially, or send us a note, there it is, DiPietro for you, Post Office Box 700, East Aurora, New York, 14052. Catch me on Facebook. If you've got any comments or concerns, send them along at either one of those spots. Send us a letter. Any financial support is appreciated. God bless you. We're going to fight the fight here, folks. We're going to continue. We've got hope in New York State. This is a great state. We're not going to let it go. We're going to keep fighting for you, for your rights, your individual rights, your freedoms, and your financial stability, and your American way of life. God bless you. Happy New Year. Thanks for listening.
You have been watching Truth in Politics with New York Assemblyman David DiPietro. Search for DiPietro for you and tune in every week on Facebook, Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, and many other internet platforms, including the Big Whack Radio Internet podcast. Thank you for listening.